Hello, dumplings. Welcome. It's been a while. I feel like everybody else had a hard summer and a busy summer, and I thought, I haven't been able to read in a while. So I thought to myself, with fall coming and the nice weather coming, I think we could all use something to comfort us and make us feel better about life when times are slower. And I thought, why don't I ask a bunch of YouTubers that I really love to watch what books have healed something in them? Stay until the end to see what my picks are, but without further ado, here they are.
Thank you so much, ADH Reader, for having us. We couldn't be more excited that you invited us to do this. For a book that healed me, I have one that maybe a lot of people won't be surprised with. Sea of Tranquility by Emily St. John Mandel. You're laughing already. I can see it.
No one's shocked.
No one's shocked. It's because this book is amazing. It's incredible. But I mean, it's not necessarily that the plot itself healed something in me, because the book is really, you would not think of it as a sci-fi once you start reading it. It is, I don't want to give too much away because it's something you should really go in blind on, but it is a story that transcends time, sometimes space, a little bit. And you're following an event through time that might be shattering a lot of things in a different timeline at the same time, which sounds confusing because you haven't read the book, so go read it. But the reason that this did heal something in me is that I had reached a point where I knew that I loved reading, and I had just finished the Harry Potter series, and I hit that slump that I think a lot of us are familiar with, where you finish the series and you start to realize it's almost like you've lost somebody. I can't talk to these characters anymore. I can't be in this world anymore. And you hit that slump where you just stop reading for a while because you're upset you can't go back. And this was the book that brought me back to reading. And it's just, Emily St. John's Mandel prose is so fantastical and delicate and whimsical. And I talk a lot about books that when you finish them and put them down, it leaves you just feeling like I need to sit and be with my thoughts after this book. That is one of those books. Can't recommend it enough. Absolutely healed something in me. How about you?
I will, with all that shattering that you're talking about and happened, it's still like a beautiful strand of hope that runs all the way through.
Absolutely. Yeah. Very,
so
very human
story.
A lot of slice of life in there in a cool way.
Yeah. Hey, okay. This is not going to shock anybody either, because it's very recent. I just read it. I'm going to pull up All the Pretty Horses by Cormac McCarthy.
Cheater.
And you know what? You know why? You know why? Because what this healed in me?
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit of homesickness.
Really?
Maybe a little bit of homesickness. Yes. So much of the story happens in Bexar County, Texas, where I was born and raised. Not only the state, but the actual county. It took me back there. It took me back to my family. It reminded me what it was like to be in a large mythical place that it takes a certain type of person to not only tame all the pretty horses, but tame the place itself. And as time goes by and we get past that taming, what's a young man to do when he can't leave his mark, when things are maybe becoming a little bit too civilized? And it just was such a great kind of take me back home feeling. I really responded to it. It was like there were scenes in there that I have been in that place. I'd had that conversation with my own father, and it just allowed me to reflect on some of my younger life and cure a little bit of homesickness that I was maybe not even know I was feeling until I read it.
Lovely answer. Now I feel like I can't judge you.
Well, you know what? That should be a good status quo for you at all times, son.
I'm not going to take that advice. Thank you so much for having us, ADHD Reader. I hope people pick up those books.
Hey everybody, I'm Brian from the channel Belltube, and when the ADHD Reader reached out to me to offer a book that was instrumental in helping me heal in some way, it was a really obvious answer for me. I know it's a big ask, but it's 16 books. It's The Realm of the Elderlings series by Robin Hobb. And how did this heal me, or what kind of role did it, take in why would that series rise above everything else in this particular topic? And I think in my case, it was extremely situational. If you're unaware, the Realm of the Elderlings follows a main character named Fitz through the time he's about 6 years old, all the way up to by the time you get to book 16, he's an older gentleman at that point. And for me personally, about midway through the series, when we get to the Tawny Man trilogy, he was about my age at the time that I happened to be reading it. And there were passages within this book that I've never done this before, by the way. I actually took notes and wrote down quotes out of a fantasy book. I've never done that before. But because of where Fitz was in his life, mirroring where I was in my life, and Robin Hobb's ability to really pull out the humanity in characters and make them relatable, even though we're talking about a fantasy world, it just hit a complete home run for me. And at the time that I was reading it, it couldn't have come at a better time, because I put those books down and I felt like, you know what? I feel seen. I feel heard. There's somebody else out there named Robin Hobb who's gone through some of the things that I feel like I'm going through. And through her amazing ability to communicate through the written word, I feel like I'm not the only one out there. And it just really kind of gave me a sense of belonging. It gave me a sense that I'm not the only person that struggled with these types of things. And just knowing that in and of itself, forget about the solutions, but just knowing that I wasn't alone in it, it made all the difference in the world. I cannot recommend the Realm of the Elderlings series high enough. I want to thank you for inviting me to come do this clip. The more people that I can share my love for that series with, the better. Thank you so much, and we'll see you guys soon. Bye-bye.
What's up, guys? Preacherreads here, and I've been tasked with sharing some books that have changed me or healed me as a person. When I think of fiction and how it has healed me, the thing I think about the most is emotion. I grew up in a situation where I shoved emotion down as a mechanism to deal with some trauma. And so throughout my life, I've been pushing through those barriers to try to be a person who is more able to express themselves, able to feel the full range of emotion in a way that is positive. And so in the fiction space, the books that really do this for me are the ones that tend to bring me to a place where I deal with my emotions. So let's talk about a couple of those. The first one is A Monster Calls by Patrick Ness. This really forced me to deal with the concept of death and grief and mourning in a way that I never really had before in the fictional space. And man, this book brought me to tears and really forced me to stare death in the face. And I think that is so important. Next up, another book that made me deal with the fact that, man, some people's struggles in life drive them to a place where they feel no hope, and how being around other people and developing relationships and love can help to heal that, is A Man Called Ove by Frederick Bachman. Not going to say much more about this one other than the fact that, man, it really hit home for me in that concept. And being a pastor, man, one of the most important things I can do is understand where people are coming from so that I can minister to them. And this book really helped me to grasp what it feels like to be a person without hope. Next up is Ordinary Grace by William Kent Kruger. Man, this book dealing with loss and mourning and doubt and giving me the perspective of a pastor and father who was able to be faithful in the midst of these things was really eye-opening for me and helped me to really ask myself if I would be that type of person in that situation. Then we have one that hit way too close to home, and that was Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver. This book made me have to deal with the fact that I tend to be very pessimistic towards those who are struggling with addiction because of the things I've been through in my life. It made me ask the question, am I doing what is necessary to help deal with the problem that exists systematically around me and even within my own family tree when it comes to addiction and generational trauma? Man, it is healing to have to look that in the face. And then lastly, Boy's Life by Robert McCammon. Man, it was healing for me because it reminded me about the importance of remembering fondly your memories. Again, I have a lot of awesome memories in my life, a lot of not awesome memories in my life, but man, there's so much that I'm grateful for when it comes to my memories and to how I grew up, into the friends I had and the people I had who loved me. And so that's it for my fiction. For my nonfiction, obviously, guys, the thing that has changed me the most, that has healed me the most, is the truth of the gospel in the Holy Bible. If you'd like to talk more about that, have any questions about it, you can find me in a lot of different places. Preacher Reads on YouTube. Would love to talk to you more about what I think is the most healing story that exists, and that's the story of Jesus. Thank you guys so much for listening to me ramble. See ya.
What's up, Beasties? Thank you so much for including me in this collaboration. I think it's a really cool one. It all starts with the book that began this healing process was The Blade Itself by Joe Abercrombie. First Law, and all of the books. I blew through the First Law. And before that, I had not read anything for a long time. I had not read fantasy for a long time. Just, life, wife, kids, job, all the things. But there was a deeper reason too. But this book, I loved it, and I just devoured it, and I devoured the whole series, and it just got me back into reading. Then I read Red Rising, and I was just on fire again for reading. But this book was where that started, and it helped me to finish one of my favorite series of all time as well, which I'm going to talk about next. In 2011, I lost my mom to cancer. There's my mom and me when I was a babe. And here she is shortly before she passed with my two oldest kiddos. So when I lost my mom, we both were big readers. She taught me the love of reading, and we actually both read the Dresden Files. It was her favorite series too. We would read it, talk about it, and it was awesome. And we had both just read Changes, which was a fantastic book. Big shift in the series, book 9. She had bought Side Jobs, short story collection, and she was reading it when the cancer just took hold and she got too sick to read. And I got this after the very book that she had and was reading. It still got her bookmark in it on the page that she was on when she, the last time before she passed. The follow-up to Changes was Ghost Story, and this was part of why I stopped reading and didn't read for a long time. I was just so sad, and dealing with grief, and just it feeling unfair. And I wanted to read this book, and I would try, but it was just so hard. It just felt like betraying my mom a little bit, or it wouldn't be the same, or like I was moving on without her and leaving her behind. But reading First Law and loving reading again, reading Red Rising, getting into those books, it just reminded me that my mom would want me to read. She would want me to finish the series, to keep going. So thank you again for including me in this. I appreciate it, and I hope you'll all check out First Law, Red Rising, and Dresden Files. And if you haven't checked out my channel yet, please come along. And if you ever want to chat, if you're dealing with the loss of a loved one, I've been there. And story is a great way to help heal.
Hey everyone, I'm Nikhil with Shelf-Esteem. I'm a composer, now also a booktuber. Thank you so much to the ADHD Reader for having me be a part of this awesome collaboration about books that healed you. And I really believe that books have the power to change the world and change oneself in the process. I remember in 2016, I was going through a little bit of a career transition, and I was feeling kind of in crisis mode at the time. I was feeling very aimless, didn't really know exactly what to do. And I was alone in LA during the Christmas holidays, so not a lot of traffic, not a lot going on, plenty of time for going on hikes by myself, thinking, meditating, and reading a lot of great books. In particular, one of the books I got a chance to read, and what one became, it became 7, was a seminal series by none other than my favorite author of all time, Stephen King, and that is this giant heavy box set of The Dark Tower. So this ended up being a 7-book journey of Roland's quest for finding the Dark Tower, his singular obsession. And I could really relate to that just based on a career in entertainment. You know, you kind of have this almost tunnel vision, and you're not really sure why you're seeking it even sometimes. I was kind of going through a little bit of an existential crisis, I guess you could say, and so I could really relate to the plight of Roland, and I honestly felt while I was reading it that I was getting the keys to the universe. There's an interconnectedness not only with his other works, but with the profundity of life. And Stephen King explores that philosophically in the context of these amazing characters. It's sci-fi, fantasy, horror, Western, pop culture references, and yet you feel like it's all converging to the point, which is a Dark Tower. And I really felt like it helped me answer certain questions I had about my own life. What about purpose? You know, what's that fine line between obsession and madness, right? So I found it to be extremely therapeutic, actually, to read that series. And I would highly recommend it to anyone who wants to ask the big questions, but also read some great books along the way.
Hello, friends. I was asked by the ADHD reader to talk about a book that healed me in some way. It took me a little bit to think about, in what context would that mean for me, right? What would have healed me? And the book I'm going to actually suggest is Sky's End by Mark J. Gregson. So it's just a YA, sci-fi / fantasy story that is really good. But the reason why it healed me is because as a teenager, I was an avid reader. I loved reading. I would read at least one book a month or more if I had the money to do so. I did grow up poor. It meant a lot to me to be able to read every day. And at some point in my life, I stopped reading. Just wouldn't read nearly as much, maybe a book a year, if that. Basically throughout all of my 20s and some of my early 30s. I'm 35 now. And what made Sky's End so special for me is because I watched this journey of the author, Mark J. Gregson, on Instagram, where he had worked so hard to create this book. He had been trying to get published. He had written many novels, and this was the first one that garnered attention, and he was able to take a step up and finally take a step toward his dream. And I had been spending a lot of my life up to that point of trying to figure out what the heck am I going to do with it? What's my purpose? Outside of being a husband and a father of 3 wonderful kiddos, what am I meant to do? What am I meant to give to the world? And so it inspired me to get back into reading. And that was at the beginning of 2024, actually. And so not too long ago in terms of the grand scheme of things. And so it was so inspiring for me to start reading. And I became a voracious reader, even more than normal, because I was able to be fortunate enough to afford the books that I wanted and to get the collection that I wanted. And of course, having ADHD myself, I go ham on buying things sometimes because I want to collect all the cool things. But what I mean down to it, though, and how it healed me is because it brought me back to a place of passion that I had forgotten about to an extent. And now I have a YouTube channel that I love. I'm building a great community. I'm building great collaborations, especially ADHD Reader. This is such an awesome opportunity, and I thank you for letting me do this video. There's so many wonderful things that are happening in my life, and all of that turned around from that book. So that is the book. Once again, Sky's End by Mark J. Gregson. Check it out. It's a fun one.
While it might seem very exotic to film in Japan, the reality is the cicadas are wild, I'm sweating, and the mosquitoes are lying in wait. Hello, ADHD reader. How are we doing? Now, I thought your premise was very interesting. The book that saved me. The book that healed me. And unless you're one of these kind of miracle people who had the Bible on their chest when they got shot, that's going to be more of an emotional saving, I gather. And I am very fortunate to some extent. I don't have any kind of moments where a book literally turned the corner of my life and transformed me into a new and better person. Quite frankly speaking, I was already a pretty great person to begin with. Now, this might... Oh, it's a leaf in my hair. Oh, it's a bug. No, it's a leaf. Now, I want to talk about the Dresden Files by Jim Butcher. Now, this might seem like an odd choice at first, because the Dresden Files doesn't seem like it has much saving material behind it, right? There are these entertaining, kind of procedural, pulpy novels where a wizard called Harry runs around Chicago and solves mysteries, and he interacts with fairies and vampires, etc., etc., etc. So in 2020, my son was born, and he was born during COVID, and he was wonderful, and I loved him, even though he looked like a raisin. I still loved him. But I did have this nagging, pressing, quite heavy worry in the back of my mind, which was, if I'm working, and if I'm now responsible for a life, is my reading about to go down the drain? And so, when my son was about 2 months old, I picked up Stormfront, which is the first book in the Dresden Files by Jim Butcher, and I read it in 2 or 3 days. I mean, you could argue that's bad parenting, but on the other hand, it was a really wonderful experience because it showed me that this was not true, and this is something I could still carry through as a parent. Reading isn't something I had to give up, despite taking care of young people. Between 2020 and the end of 2021, I want to say it was about a year and change, I read all of the Dresden stuff. You know, I read the novels, I read the novella, I read the short stories, and I had a great time. And that is what I mean by it saving me. It was an experience that made me realize that I could still be a father and still look after my child and also still hold some of my passions close and dear. So, ADHD reader, you're awesome. Thank you for having me on. We haven't talked in a while, so come and find me in this park and we can have a coffee or something, huh? All the best. And if you want to see more, feel free to head over to my channel. Or don't. Up to you. Don't let me tell you what to do with your time. Goodbye.
Hey besties! First of all, thank you so much ADHD Reader for reaching out to us and letting us be a part of this awesome collab talking about mental health books. I'm Tabitha.
And I'm Sherilyn.
And we're from Books, Beverages, and Besties. So do you want to go ahead and start with your books?
I would love to. So the 2 books I brought with me today are the Elements of Cadence duology by Rebecca Ross. They are A River Enchanted and A Fire Endless. And these 2 books are, one, absolutely beautiful. They're set in a very gorgeous realm, filled with folktale, filled with magic, very lush, very lyrical story about many different types of relationships, whether it's familial, from parent to child, whether it's married relationships, sibling relationships, and then friend relationships across the board. We have a whole variety of beautifully depicted people trying to get through life together in it's a very peaceful, idyllic world, but there is something that comes to try to ruin that, and how these people bond together to face that circumstance and overcome everything that gets thrown at them. It's just very beautiful, very well done. And after I finished this book, I told Tabitha that this healed something in my soul I didn't even know needed healing. So it's just a very beautifully told story, and it transports you into this magical world that's just a breath of fresh air and has very, very lovely people and a very lovely story.
It does. Very, very magical. Mine, I have 2 different ones also because we can't follow rules. So I have Man's Search for Meaning and Service Model. And the reason I'm pairing these 2 together is they both have such a deep discussion on purpose and like what is your purpose in life and how that can help you grow or find who you are as a person, and how even in like really tough, awful situations, you are still important, you still matter, even if you feel like your purpose has been taken away from you. So I think both of these are so powerful if you are just lost and searching for some kind of purpose. Man's Search for Meaning is a nonfiction written by someone who survived the Holocaust, and he talks about how much when people had purpose, they were able to find joy even in those horrible, horrible times. And this one's about a robot who, his purpose of being a service robot, he's a service model, that was taken away from him, and he doesn't know what's next. He doesn't know where he's going. And so you've got one that's definitely more heavy and one that is definitely more light. So from us, you have 3 different options, and we're so excited to see what everyone else says. Thank you.
What's up, everybody? This is Jake here from Nerd Level Rising, and today we're talking about books that healed something in us. And this is one that I've had to think about quite a bit because, you know, while I've been very deeply touched by a lot of books, it's hard for me to think of one that truly healed something, right? Like, I think a lot of my experiences have been, I'm very moved by something, I'm very inspired by something, I'm very impacted emotionally by something, I feel seen, I feel not alone, I feel a powerful reminder of something, things like that. But, it's not always something that is fixed, right? And so as I thought about this more and more, I think ultimately the answer became pretty simple at the end of the day, and that is Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. Because this, for me, was the end of a very hard time in my childhood and young adulthood. I grew up being a huge Harry Potter fan, right? Since the first movie came out, I was obsessed with Harry Potter. But when I say that I was terrified to death of Voldemort, like, that's an understatement. I cannot put into words how terrified I was. I couldn't go outside at nighttime. I could not be alone, even with all the lights on in the day. Like, I couldn't be alone ever. Going up this, after I saw the fourth movie, right, I could no longer go up to my bedroom by myself, because my bedroom was up the stairs to the left, and if that light was off and it's dark in there, like, I am not going up a staircase and looking into a dark room. If you've seen the beginning of the fourth movie, you know what I'm talking about. And so I was petrified. I couldn't deal with it. And growing up, now I wear contacts, but I always wore glasses then. My hair, oddly, was really curly and kind of poofy and middle length and messy. And so everyone said I looked like Harry, and I was constantly having nightmares. Like, it was awful. I couldn't sleep. It was horrible. And so, but I couldn't let go of the world. I couldn't stop doing this to myself. And I kept watching the movies. I kept reading the books. And when this book came out, this helped me conquer the fear. And it's just such a powerful moment. Like the resolution of the story, the very last line in the epilogue, all the themes of courage and just everything. Dude, I don't know. Like this did it for me. This helped me move on. And I was just so grateful, so grateful to be able to just move on with my life and just quit being, so terrified of this thing, and actually be able to, like, if I forgot something in my bedroom that I had to go back and get, I could actually go up there and do it. I didn't have to ask my brother to come with me, or, just so, yeah, that was huge for me. So that's what I'm going to say. Harry Potter as a whole is just such a massive influence on my life. But this one in particular is special because it healed that very scared and just, I don't know, very scared part of me. So yeah, that was cool. Harry Potter, Deathly Hallows.
Thank you, ADHD reader, for inviting me to share with you a book that helped to heal me in some way. And as soon as you asked me, I knew exactly which book I would be sharing with you. And it is Fool's Errand by Robin Hobb. This is the first book in the Tawny Man trilogy, which is part of the Realm of the Elderlings. Now, I had gone through a loss. We had lost our beautiful dog, Belladonna, who had been a dear friend and part of the family for a number of years. This was a few years ago. And it was devastating. I love dogs. I grew up with dogs, always have loved them. And I think that dogs are the best people I know in many ways. And it was just very difficult. I remember distinctly having to go to the vets with Belladonna. By the way, Belladonna was named after Bilbo's mother, Belladonna Took, but had to take her to the vets. And it was one of the hardest days of my life, saying goodbye to her there. But yeah, it was devastating. But I happened to be reading Fool's Errand at the time, and it was a really happy coincidence, you could say. But it's a book that I can't say too much about specifically why, but because I don't want to spoil anything for anyone. But let's just say that this book really helped me to process my grief over the loss of Belladonna. And it was just perfect. And I actually, at one point later, reached out to Robin Hobb via social media just to thank her. I didn't even necessarily expect a reply. It's not like she knows who I am, but I reached out and thanked her for writing this book, which was so helpful to me in processing my grief. And she wrote back a really gracious reply. It was a really wonderful interaction. And yeah, so that's my my little story for you. Fool's Errand by Robin Hobb. Realm of the Elderlings, in general, just one of the greatest series that you could ever read, in my opinion, period, but also just in terms of all the experiences that people go through. The difficult things, but also the beautiful things. Just captures all of life in this series so marvelously.
Big thank you to ADHD Reader for including me in this collaborative video. And one book that has greatly impacted me on an emotional level. Well, I'm going to walk you through the thought process of where I was at, because like the first thing I thought of was like, okay, Robin Hobb's books. And then I was like, I really want to pick one book, not the whole series. And then, Robin Hobb is somebody that has emotionally impacted a ton of people, and it's probably going to be somebody else's answer. So then I thought Malazan. I flirted with some non-fantasy picks like Perks of Being a Wallflower and The Seven Moons of Mali Almeida. And I decided to go with a comic book, actually. And this is the absolute edition, but the book is Mr. Miracle by Tom King and Mitch Gerrits. This is a truly remarkable story. You can find it on Amazon for like $20 for the paperback. You don't have to get this exorbitant hardcover, but so in this book, the opening panel is scot-free Mr. Miracle has attempted to take his own life, and throughout this book we see this man's journey to overcome this severe melancholia and depression that has kind of taken over his life. This is a man who has suffered a lot of trauma. This is a man whose own father traded him for a hostage situation. The planet of Apocalypse was conquering them, and they traded sons. They traded firstborn sons, High Father of New Genesis and Dark Side of Apocalypse. They traded Orion for scot-free. They traded their firstborns. And man, this character has been through hell, and he's come out the other end. And, characters who've been through hell, real life people who've been through hell, they don't just come out the other end unfazed. But, it's a continuous battle. And in a world where you have new gods and Kryptonians and Green Lanterns and Batmans and these godlike mythic characters, you have the character of Scot-Free, who proves that just getting up every day and doing your best and living on, even after you have suffered these terrible traumatic grievances, that is being a hero. And that is why a book that greatly impacted me is Mr. Miracle by Tom King. Peace.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm Bookborn from the channel Bookborn, and I normally cover fantasy and sci-fi. And the idea of a book that healed me was such an interesting question. As a lifelong reader, I feel like books have been healing me my entire life. And it's such an interesting thing because when I think of all of my favorite books throughout my whole life that have meant so much to me, that got me through really hard times, when I was sad, like when something bad was happening and I would go curl up in bed with that favorite book, it's hard to pinpoint what it is always about a favorite book that changes something in you. What part of the character work or events reflect back something you needed to see about yourself. And so a lot of books I was thinking of, I guess they did heal something in me, but I don't know how to pinpoint what that was or if it was a direct one-to-one. Anyway, I think it's an interesting question. This is all to say it was very difficult for me to pick one thing, but I decided to go with the series, The Dandelion Dynasty by Ken Liu. Ken Liu is one of my favorite authors. And one thing about the Dandelion Dynasty as a whole is I felt like it just had a lot of lessons that really resonated with me in the way that Liu wrote about them, about legacy and modernity and change. And there's so many phrases within the series that I still think about regularly, like the universe is knowable, do the most interesting thing, teeth on the board. And the way that those phrases were incorporated into the story are things that I still think about regularly and things that have made me think differently about the way I live my life. And that is why I love reading and books so much and the way they expand us. So I hope if you haven't given Ken Liu or Dandelion Dynasty a try, you'll be convinced to. Definitely look into it, and I can't wait to see what other people's picks are.
Hi ADHD reader and crew, thank you so much for inviting me to collab on this project. Now, as for a book that has healed something in me, I mean, it's gotta be The Catcher in the Rye, right? No, it is not a red flag book. I will not be hearing any of that slander today. I'd argue that it is the most vulnerable and yet sarcastic exploration of the transience that we encounter in our everyday. The idea that we are living in what shall become, as Dostoevsky terms it, an irretrievable past. We follow Holden Caulfield as he once again fails out of his school and runs away to New York in the hopes to elongate this time before his parents have to find out about his yet another failure. He feels so lost and really struggles to find meaningful connections because of how phony everything is. But he keeps trying through these conversations he keeps having with the random people he encounters. Personally, I've reread this book in full 4 times over the past 10 years, and every single time I find a new nugget, which is exactly what I need to hear in that moment in time. For example, here's a passage that really spoke to me recently. Among other things, you'll find that you're not the first person who was ever confused and frightened and even sickened by human behavior. You're by no means alone on that score. You'll be excited and stimulated to know. Many, many men have been just as troubled morally and spiritually as you are right now. Happily, some of them kept records of their troubles. You'll learn from them if you want to, just as someday, if you have something to offer, someone will learn something from you. It's a beautiful reciprocal arrangement, and it isn't education, it's history, it's poetry. So in vain with this being one of those beautiful and reciprocal arrangements, let me recommend this book that has helped me so much to you. Happy reading.
Hello everyone, my name is Noelle D, and firstly I wanted to say thank you so much for the invitation to come on here and talk about books that have healed something within me, which is something that I've been thinking about and just trying to think what has healed me recently, what has been helping me. And the obvious answer for me as a Christian is the Bible, of course. The Lord has been healing me through the Bible and constantly is always. But when it comes to fictional things and things that need to be healed within that realm was actually things I didn't really know needed to be healed within myself. Now the answer for that is The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. These do happen to be my favorite editions of The Lord of the Rings. I'm not sure about The Hobbit, but it is definitely very reminiscent of the one that I read in my childhood, which is what brings me to my next point, is actually that I needed to heal as a reader. I did not read since I was in 5th grade. The summer after 5th grade, after that summer, going into 6th grade, it was all going outside and video games and things like that for me. I completely stopped reading, and one of the last books that I read or started to read was The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. And when I was 22 and got out of the Marine Corps, there was some people on YouTube starting to read and starting to make that their general content, and I didn't want to read what this person was reading. Very contemporary romance, contemporary fiction, things like that, which I'm getting into. But I was like, well, I love The Lord of the Rings. I read The Hobbit when I was young. What if I pick up The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings and try to be a reader again? And this absolutely jump-started my journey into reading and also becoming a booktuber. It is what started it all for me, so it healed me as a reader to enjoy reading again and not see it as something I just have to do for school, but something that I can do for enjoyment. The other one that I wanted to bring up was something that needed to heal within me that had to do with manga, and it had to do with the portrayal of women in a lot of mangas and how things can be put in a certain way within the manga genre. And Ichiro Oda, he has helped just repair my love for manga and anime in general. And I've just absolutely adored the series, and it has absolutely healed that part within me and has influenced me to start reading other mangas as well. I've got Frieren, Vinland Saga, Vagabond in the background, and just absolutely opened up a genre to me that I've been missing out on for about the same amount of time. Since I stopped reading books, I stopped reading manga as well. So those are the 2/3, I guess, books that have healed me and healed different parts of me, and I am very thankful for being invited on here. And yeah, it was a great question to think about, and I'm glad that you asked. All right, well, everyone have a blessed day.
Wasabi Gangsters, thanks for having me on this collab, the ADHD Reader. We are talking about books that healed something in me. Now, I know what you're thinking. Chance, you're holding up the book Kingdoms of Death. Are you certain that something in this book healed something in you? And now let me tell you, I'm positive. Now, what does that say about my psyche? I don't know. That's not my specialty. But I will say that there is something that happens at the end of this book. And if you've read this, if you know, you know. The back 20% of this book, after we get, I don't want to say too much I'm not going to spoil anything. Stop it. Stop asking me to spoil stuff. I'm not going to do it. But something happens in the back part of this book, let's just say, that was so cathartic and such a moment of stillness that forced me to reflect, which is something that I deeply, honestly, sometimes I struggle with being still. I struggle with moments of stillness and peace and tranquility. And so for a book with the title Kingdoms of Death, to do that, I cannot speak highly enough about Sun Eater as a whole, as a series. The character transformation we get from our main POV, our character, the one POV, in this book in particular, this book alone, let alone throughout the series, it is one of the most healing experiences I've had in a very unique way, and just like a very human way, in a way that, it tells you you're not alone, right? Which is nice. It's a very cathartic read. But yeah, a book called Kingdoms of Death healed something in me. This has been Chance Dillon, over from the Chance Dillon YouTube channel. And the more you know, Kingdoms of Death will heal you. That's all I had to say. It wouldn't be a me video if there wasn't some discomfort, would there? Would it be? Would there be? Would it be? Would that it be? You guys have a nice day.
Hello, my name is Philip Hall, and I am an Australian poet, critic, and essayist who runs the Booktube channel, A Poet Reads to Write. And I also live with social anxiety, severe depression, and PTSD. So what is it that saves me? Well, there are three things, I think, that have really given me a new lease on life and have completely transformed me into hopefully the jubilant type person you see in front of you today. So what is it that saves me? Number one, my two precious grandchildren. I have these two adorable little grandchildren, Jeremy and Eloise, and to them I am Popeye. Oh, I love being a Popeye to Jeremy and Eloise. They really are the light of my life. And secondly, I share my life with an ex-racer rescue greyhound that I call Billy Blue. And if Jeremy and Eloise are the light of my life, oh boy, Billy Blue is certainly the love of my life. When that dog came into my life about 6 years ago, I was in a very vulnerable situation. You know, I was in and out of psychiatric hospitals, and I was a recent suicide survivor. And within 2 weeks of that precious hound coming into my life, I was a different person. So I really was very dramatically saved by grandchildren and by this adorable, affectionate, gentle ex-racer rescue greyhound, my Billy Blue. But the third thing that has always been a savior to me is books. I love books. You know, as I said, I now make my living. I am so lucky to have turned my obsession into my job. And I make my living as a poet, book critic, and literary essayist. So books are my writing life, my career life, if you like, but they're also the thing that brings me so much joy. You know, I love living with all of these treasures that you see around me. You know, I live in a tiny home in Australia, and I am surrounded by beautiful books, and they really are the thing that adds so much joy to my life. I am not saved in particular by any one book, and I'm certainly not saved by war poetry. But I thought today I might share with you 3 books that I have recently purchased that have had a big difference to my life. One of them is this wonderful book by Wilfred Owen. You know, these are all World War I poets who actually died in the First World War. This is an amazing book. Here's a portrait of Wilfred. I'm sorry, this is Rupert Brooke. Here's a portrait of Rupert Brooke, and you can see these astounding pictures that are in the book. These are just amazing deluxe limited edition volumes of their poetry that was put out by the Folio Society of London. Here's the volume by Edward Thomas. Here's a lovely portrait of Edward Thomas, a wonderful lyrical poet. And here's one of the beautiful illustrations from this book. You can see this poetry, it really juxtaposes the horror of war with the beauty of the English landscape, you know, going back to almost, you know, that beautiful piece by Ralph Vaughan Williams, you know, The Lark Ascending, the sheer lyrical beauty of it, which was soon to be just swept away by the horrors of the trenches of the First World War. And that's what's going on in this poetry as well. You know, the poetry celebrates great rural beauty, the great Acadia of the rural England. But it is all about to be just blown away by the trenches of the First World War. The last book that I thought I would share with you is, of course, Wilfred Owen. Here's a lovely portrait of Wilfred Owen. Rupert Brooke and Wilfred Owen are also, of course, now known not only as World War I poets, but they are also known, of course, as great LGBTQI heroes of the literary canon. You know, here's again, you know, that beautiful vision of English Acadia, rural bliss that is about to become the horrors of the trenches. You know, this poetry just juxtaposes the great healing beauty of rural Acadia with the horrors of the First World War. It's marvelous poetry. So, you know, I live with these wonderful books. I am saved. I am saved by grandchildren, my beautiful greyhound, and by books. The adventure of reading books and writing my own books. Thank you, and bye for now.
Well, it's going to give us a lot of books to add to our TBR, isn't it? For my picks, I went ahead and picked first The Road, and the other book by Cormac McCarthy. The other book is The Bois Debout by Jean-François Caron. This unfortunately has not been translated, but the story is both about a son and their father, and the different circumstances that sometimes in life cause not only difficulties, but various challenges into how we relate to our parents and things that we don't realize that our parents have done for us. We start with The Road, which is not a book that you would expect to heal you, but we follow a father and a son trying to survive a post-apocalyptic world. A bleak, savage world with no possible hope. And yet, this father, in spite of the pain that he's experiencing and the fears and the absolute agony that he goes through during the story, he does his best to help his son survive, to help him carry through a future with hope and a future with joy. Somehow he tries to give his son memories that will give him a sense of brightness in a world that has none. The other book, The Bois Debout, is a story about a complicated relationship between a father and his son, and how sometimes we don't really understand our parents, and that can cause friction. Our parents don't understand us, we don't understand them. That can cause a difficult life for the both of us, or a difficult relationship for the both of us. But in the end, we find out things about the father and how much he cared about his son. And to me, both of these stories have been healing in some way, because they brought to the surface things that I didn't know I was holding on to. Growing up, we had a pretty difficult childhood. it's not the worst, but it wasn't the easiest. It was chaotic, it was stressful. It wasn't a normal childhood, and in terms of the road, I saw my father, going through domestic abuse, manipulation, all kinds of damaging relationship that he's had with people, and at every turn he was being either kicked down or going through horrific pain. He was so burnt out because he was taking care of a disabled wife. He was a full-time caretaker. He had a full-time job. Sometimes he had to take a second or a third job to keep us afloat. And there was 3 of us. That meant that he was going through a lot and he was being kicked down. And I didn't realize that I held so much resentment toward the fact that this man, who was so good and who was so kind, had to experience so much pain. And I never, instead of looking at it with the idea that, hey, my dad never lost his joy and his kindness and his optimistic hope for the future. He gave of himself as much as he could in spite of not having been present that much. He really survived a horrific period that lasted for about 20-25 years. And he still experiences things that are difficult because of that. But he never lost his hope, and he never lost his joy for life. He continues to always have a smile on his face, and I just remember all the good things that my dad brought to us. And some of my friends didn't have 2 good parents, and I did. And that book made me realize, hey, my dad was going through a lot of pain just as I did. And in spite of it, he came out with his head held high. He carried on with the adversity, and he got through it. And so that made me a better person in the end, because I never lost sight of, the goal and the hope, and not letting the darkness take over. And for the other one, comes in relation to my mother, which I'll never understand my mother. We're alienated from each other, and I don't think that I'll ever understand my mother. And that's okay. That's part of life. Sometimes there are things that come between people, and I don't know what kind of pain she experienced. I know that there was a lot of abuse in her life that probably caused her to not be able to function that way. But maybe one day I'll understand her better. Maybe one day there'll be hope for reconciliation. I don't know. But that book gave me hope that maybe it's possible. Or maybe one day I'll understand enough to be, that's okay, that I didn't have a normal mother, and I don't have to be bitter about that. So I hope that that was edifying for you, and I hope that you'll find throughout all of these choices and all the beautiful things that people have said, some books that could heal you. Let us know in the comments what books have been good for you and what they healed, if you're willing to share. I want to thank everybody that took some time out of their day to share some very personal stories and books that have, in a very personal way, changed something in them. I think it's important that we share these things together. That's what makes the book community so wonderful, and I hope that what's been offered to you will be helpful for yourself in the future. All in all, I hope that you'll find beautiful reads and take care of yourself, So have a good one.